Welcome to the third meeting of 7+7, starting with Kjell Portman's film Walking the Line. Thank you very much. We will have time to discuss all these in the frame of all the works. And at the end of the presentation. And it was very interesting to see how all our friends and colleagues, Chris, Bill, Molly, Marcos, work together to create this collective approach. Thank you very much, Kel.
Thank you.
Then we go to Emilia and Iro.
Hello
Welcome,
to
Emilia
all.
and Iro.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, I'm gonna share my. We have created a small PowerPoint presentation to talk about our workshop.
Okay, we designed a participatory performance that focuses on the concept of community. Our questions are, what is the way to return to it? How do we shift from the individual to the collective, from being a spectator to an active citizen? How does one step of movement result in a group dance? The starting point of our workshop was at the margins of Psarades. From there we walked through the village, following the small roads, and mostly we were far away from the taverns and the shops.
Sorry. Okay. So, Iro, help me out because I cannot see what.
Okay, here is the video, Emilia.
Okay, so we have a small video from our walk throughout the roads of the small paths in Psarades, where we, as Iro explained, try to retrace hidden steps of the past, see fragments of the past, of streets that are no longer used so often because they are far away from the shops and the main area of Psarades. Okay. And then that walk led us to, to the square and the old schoolyard of Psarades. Give me a minute. So, our walking ended at the square and the courtyard of the old school, where the second part of our workshop took place. So we perceived the square as a symbolic space. I'm having some trouble. As a symbolic space of collective cohabitation, a space where everyone has access and power, and a space of equality. And our main concern was, how do we inhabit this space? So,
and there outside of the school, we began an imaginary journey into the past by looking back at the life of the square in the past. It had a central role in the life of the village. It was a meeting point because there were full of cafes, and also as a schoolyard, the children were always playing there. So the participants were asked to close their eyes and imagine all the encounters that have previously taken place in the square. That was the heart of the village. Now it's serving mainly as a parking lot. And we shared with the participants information from the past that we gathered from local people of the village. Yes, because this square was a meeting point of all the people who were living there.
so then, So after that, the participants were invited to reactivate the space by following a guided score, a game. So we had placed painted stones across the square with hidden instructions underneath. The participants were invited to follow the instructions or ignore them as they pleased. Sorry. So there are some examples of the instructions of the game.
They could also write down their own instructions or
instructions.
desire.
And they could also be observers or just participants. So we decided to use a guided score game in order to make it easier for the participants to engage in this activity, so that to avoid all the pressure of performing or everything else. And our main concern was to try to re-energize and reactivate this space that was mostly empty, as we said before. So by following these instructions, we observed that the participants started becoming more active in the procedure. So then, if someone was observing them from the outside the score, they could see people laughing, running, drawing, following the instructions.
So somehow all these actions brought life back to the square, and I think our idea worked. But if I think about it now, I think it, like, if there were more people, it would be more rich and complicated in a good way. I think it would have worked better even with some more people.
Yes. And of course, we ended our workshop in a circle where we exchange our feedback. And I agree with Iro that although I think the workshop was successful in meeting its point, I think the more people will have made it, the more interesting for everybody to involved. So mainly that was our idea.
Yes, thank you.
And
Yes, thank you.
when this finished, how did it finish? I mean, did you?
It came to
How was the end? Let's say.
how it ended, how we came to a stop.
Yeah.
I think quite organically, and basically we started gathering all the stones and creating this circle with all the stones and the instructions. So we came to a circle, put all the instructions, and had time to contemplate. But I'm not quite sure of the duration of the workshop. Do you have an estimation about how long the action in the square lasted?
I think that the action in the square was around 20 minutes or
20
something.
minutes or something.
But the whole thing, I think it was an hour or a bit less.
Because also our not a question we had is how long we can keep the space active, for how long we can keep the space active. So that's why we're saying that if there were more people, we could keep the space active for even longer. But with fewer participants, then it's just all the encounters between participants or between the participant and the square or the self have completed in a way. So basically, our main, as the title suggests, our main idea was that in order to walk home, to be home, you need a community and you need active active public spaces where people can encounter and can live through life in a shared experience, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. and for your and as we said, I didn't have the chance to attend it, but looking at the material, discussing, that's the thing about the artwork. Artwork has also to do with how you perceive it in other ways as well, even with the narration of what has occurred. So we will have time to reflect on your project after we conclude this series.
Bonsoir tout le monde, je suis heureux de vous retrouver pour partager cette étape de mon travail à Prespa. La vidéo que vous allez voir montre un moment de bascule lorsque la distance cesse d'être du kilomètre pour devenir un battement de cœur, du coup vital. Pour porter ce film en anglais, j'ai choisi d'utiliser le clone de ma voix. C'est une manière simple de transformer ma limite linguistique en prolongement numérique. Voici Ex-tracés, l'anatomie d'un seuil. À toi, Anne-Marie, merci.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back with you and to share this stage of my work from Prespes. The video that you're about to see shows a pivotal moment in my work where I ceased to measure distance in kilometers and started to measure it in heartbeats, or what I call vital cost. To bring this film into English, I've actually made an artificial clone of my voice. And it's a simple way to transform my linguistic limitation into a digital extension or prosthesis. This is Ex-tracés, the anatomy of a threshold.
Thank you.
My name is Ridha Dhib. I am an artist, walker and artist. I move forward with a trinity, my body, my smartphone, my staff. In 2022, during Ex-tracés, a walk of over 5,000 kilometers retracing the lines of borders and exiles, I crossed on foot the passage between Albania and Greece, from Korç to Florina. I was walking the line that separates two countries, two languages, two worlds. My body bore the marks of that crossing, the fatigue, the dust, the shifts in rhythm at the border posts. But as I walked, a question took hold, deeper than geography. What does a border cost the body? Not in kilometers, in heartbeats. That question became the thread running through all my work, to measure not distance, but intensity. In July 2025, I returned to Greece for the Walking Arts Encounters in Prespes, not to retrace the path, but to deepen it. Each step superimposes the present and memory, the same path and yet another, the same body and yet another. On the road between Florina and Psarades, 55 kilometers under the sun, an adhesive butterfly is pressed to my chest, over my heart. It captures the invisible particles of the territory, dust, pollen, the salt of sweat. My heart rate monitor archives every beat. The t-shirt I wear becomes an augmented skin, a living relic where the landscape inscribes itself into the flesh. What remained was to give form to the invisible. Before the chapel of Saint Nicholas in Psarades, I unroll on the ground a red strip of cloth 17 meters long, an exact fragment of the 2022 border crossing. A Greek synthetic voice, Melina, reads aloud the coordinates of the border. I walk in rhythm with her. At the precise moment she speaks, the point of crossing, I step over the red line. That moment, infinitesimal, a breath suspended, is the kairos, the exact instant when body, voice, and territory converge. There I had given form to what I carried within. The next day it was the territory that spoke. Lake Prespes, a border of water between three countries, imposed its tempo. At dawn, on the shore of that expanse, I inaugurate what I call the géo-déclamation. I address the spirit of the place in French. An artificial intelligence answers me in Greek. Between our two voices, half a second of silence, the breath of silicon. This is no longer translation. It is a shared breathing between skin and code.
Avant que le soleil ne baptise les reliefs,
Phinoilius dosionoma stanaglypha.
je tends l'oreille.
Inotoaphtinu.
Le lac bat comme un tambour inversé.
Οι λίμνοι χτυπά σαν ένα ανεστραμμένο τύμπανο.
Tes eaux ont vu naître des frontières.
Τα νερά σου έχουν δει σύνορα να γεννιούνται.
In Prespes, I understood to be crossed. It is a threshold to be inhabited. The exact place where the GPS trace becomes a heartbeat. Thus is born cardio-cartography, a geography of the living where intensity prevails over distance. From Prespes, Mnemosyne was born. Mnemosyne is a 100-day walk from Paris to Nafplio, the city in the Peloponnese where all the lines of my practice converge. 100 days of doing, 10 minutes of telling. The equation is simple. Compress 3 million heartbeats, 100 days of sweat, encounters, and solitude into a final ritual of 10 minutes. Each day will produce a capsule, GPS trace, heart rate, proof of presence. Each heartbeat adds a fold to the fabric of the reel. 30 million folds between a breath and a continent. This is not a hike, it is a distillation. Mnemosyne does not preserve, she condenses. She is the ancient Greek goddess of memory. Her name means memory itself, not just recall of facts, but the deep, living memory that holds stories, encounters, places, and meaning across time. She gives her name to this crossing because to walk is to remember with the body. And the circle closes. What began here in Prespes in July 2025, that tipping point from trace to heartbeat, will return to nourish this network in 2027. Prespes is the threshold, Mnemosyne is the path, and the path is always retraced. The map becomes flesh, the border becomes voice, the body becomes bridge.
Voilà.
Thank you very much, Ridha.
Merci.
So I think it is
Yes, hello everybody. Yeah, this was actually the third time I was coming to Prespes to the conference, so I've become familiar to the place. So I'm going to share my screen also to present the walk. So you may have noticed this painting in Psarades. It was in Dimitri and the Eclectic grocery store. And there was almost the same painting in my hotel room and also in the hotel lobby, in Nikos restaurant, another one in a restaurant at the end of the, near the lake. And Yanis confirmed me that actually you could find this kind of painting all over the region. They caught my attention because they were everywhere, and also because of the style, which is quite naive and maybe almost kitsch, which gives a very subjective vision of Psarades, but still they seem to be the official image of Psarades and Prespes. So I did a little investigation and I learned that they were painted by a Russian painter from Siberia who came to Psarades as a tourist but stayed there for 2 years. And during those 2 years, he painted the region and apparently offered or sold, I'm not sure about it, his painting to all the local shop owners. But what interested me the most was the frames. In each place, the frames are different. In Dimitri's shop, the frame is made of bamboo sticks that he uses in his fields to grow beans. At Nikos' place, the frame is made of wooden logs that he used to build the roof of his house. And it also holds religious icons and personal photos. In the restaurants, there is a fishing net and some traditional fishing tools. And it's like this everywhere. So the frames tell the story of the owner. It is as if each inhabitant has taken the painting and made it their own, adding their personal vision of the landscape. It becomes an unintentional collaborative installation, representing the landscape by mixing the painter's vision with the visions of the inhabitants. So I did not expect this discovery when I arrived in Prespes, and it really makes me want to continue this research and spend more time on it. But I felt it would be an interesting introduction to the walk that I had planned to do, named Becoming Landscape. So what does becoming landscape mean? The word landscape refers both to the place around us and to its painted representation. And it was during the Renaissance in Europe that landscape painting appeared as a genre in itself. It was closely linked to the discovery of perspective, which creates the illusion of distance and keeps the viewer outside the image. In the same way, at that time, humans beings saw themselves as outside nature, above the rest of the living. So becoming landscape could mean freeing ourselves from perspective, connecting us with what composes the landscape, and imagining a way of representing it that removes the separation between humans and nature, but also between the artist and the subjects, a representation which invites the artist and the viewer to enter the landscape and to question their relationship to it. And actually, walking arts might be a really good way to do this. So by moving from being a tourist to becoming a resident, the Siberian painter became a full member of the local community. He connected with the landscape and became an element of it. He also left behind a work that unintentionally became a space for co-creation, and whose result contains the sum of the many subjective stories of the place. A landscape that we could describe as inclusive. And this is also what I try to do with the walk Becoming Landscape. In the context of the conference, I ask myself, how can we as walking artists become the landscape that welcomes us? We arrive, more than 100 people in a village of less than 100 inhabitants. We stay there a few days, we walk through the landscape, we produce many representations of the landscape, and we leave. So what the goal of this walk was to ask the question, what position do we take? Are we inside or outside the landscape? What point of view do our representation adopt? Are our landscapes inclusive or not? So the walk, I imagine, raised this question while inviting participants to connect with the elements of the landscape and to create collaborations in order to co-create images. In the previous edition, I proposed a walk from the point of view of the inhabitants, asking them to guide us to their favorite places. And this year, I chose to limit the collaboration to non-human species and to the elements. So the walk included prompts that led to the creation of 5 different landscapes. The first one was a sound piece. So I had noticed power lines in the village where every time I walk underneath, hundreds of swallows were sitting. They would land there before flying away in circle in the sky and then return to rest. These swallows made me think of musical notes on score. And I wondered how it would sound to sing those notes. There might be there a secret symphony waiting to be discovered. So my intention was to ask the participants to form a choir and sing the notes on the wires, which was very ambitious and a bit naive. Because when we arrived, there were only a few swallows. And I am not a conductor. I was counting on Gert to help me, but he was already in too many places at the same time. So the result was quite hesitant and would have needed many more rehearsals. It sounded a bit like a piece by Xenakis with a lot more laughter and cacophony. And we also scared a few swallows who were there. But we tried, we started a dialogue, we connected with the swallows and tried to read the landscape. The second landscape questioned the idea of imprints we leave in the landscape. I had found this gate around a house where the owner had hung many eclectic objects, which tell a very surrealistic story. So I asked everyone to add something to this puzzle, something intimate, and to hide it into the landscape, an object or a story, with the instructions to come back for the next conference, it was a kind of time capsule. For the third landscape, I asked everyone to connect with an element of the landscape, to create a bond with it, like with a totem. Then we created the living sculpture with all the participants, taking into account the relationships between the elements. For example, if one person was a cloud and another was a lake, the cloud would stand above the lake, the tree would place itself at the edge of the lake, and the swallow could sit on the tree, and so on. This forced us to think about the landscape as a sum of interactions and relationship. The result was a joyful mess, again, and a living landscape sculpture with a very fragile balance. The next one consisted of asking ants for directions. I asked participants to let ants walk on their skin and to trace the path they followed. The drawing that resulted on the skin was then read as a map to move through the landscape. And finally, the last landscape was a collaboration between participants, water, sun, heat, and a plant. I asked everyone to find an element in the landscape that could be used as a brush, dip it in the water, and write the word landscape in their own language on the pier. With the heat, the word would disappear after a few seconds even. Improvisation always played a very important role in my work because to represent the landscape in an honest way, I feel like we have to accept uncertainty and accidents. It means constantly adapting, which makes it very difficult to guide a walk when nothing is certain. But at the same time, it makes it also very rewarding and playful when all the elements come together to create an inclusive work that reflects the impermanence of the world, its beauty and its fragile balance. At the end of the walk, I gave everyone a guide to become a landscape, and the instruction suggested to choose a totem, to imagine the story, the emotion, and the mood of this totem, to find a collaborator in the landscape, to choose a medium, to choose a surface to work on, to choose the scale of the landscape, a way of moving, and so on. And here's an example of a landscape that you can imagine created using this instruction. I let you imagine the landscape. I am a pelican. I am an orphan, brawler, but romantic. I fly over the lake and skip like a pebble. The ripples draw a portal. It is my horizon to cross. I dive through it. On the other side is my landscape, the one which nourishes me. It reflects on the surface. I fly through its waters. It has no borders, no gravity. It speaks only one language. And that's it. Thank you.
Welcome, Irini.
Hello. So my project that I presented in Prespa in Psarades was called Inaudible Bodies. I'm concerned with the power of sound and what it can do to the body and the mind. And as Paulina Oliveros wrote in 1973, sound is everybody's material. But I was questioning who really owns sound and what can we hear if we listen beneath the silent skin of in-between spaces through our own and others' bodies. Histories and politics come together in sound and in the embodied experience of walking and listening. And I was thinking that it's the body that struggles and survives, walks, listens, dreams, and speaks. It's the body that feels this kind of vulnerability when it's in front of others. It is the body that is in silence and that is being silenced. It is the body that is our home and is always in transit. So through sound, our bodies are affected and are able to create a web of connection with the external world, with the natural world. Inaudible Bodies is a sound book that investigates the concept of silence through an embodied listening experience. Throughout my research, when I started my master's in performing public space, I have been concerned with questions such as which bodies are visible and audible and which remain imperceptible, which bodies try to stay below the threshold of the visible and the audible, and what is silence in our collective consciousness. For me, silence is the beginning of listening. And it was my first time in Prespes, and from the day I arrived, I was driven by a desire to discover the counter narratives of the place through psychogeographic lens. I walked a lot alone, and my constant companion was a recorder. Now I want to take you on a walk with me through the village. Imagine that you are part of a symphony, the village's symphony, a symphony unfolding as you move. Listening is a performative act, a form of poetry in action. Listening is an act of love, a way of touching without taking, a way of reclaiming space. Love your listening. Landscape number 1, cemetery. The walk begins and the first stop is the cemetery. We come into life through a breath and we pass away with another breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Place one hand on your belly and listen as the sound of your breath slowly turns into the sound of the wind. People construct the political dimensions of their lives through return, mourning, and advent. After attuning to the different dimensions of sound, participants began reading aloud the names on the tombs, names that once belonged to breathing bodies, names that still inhabit the air. It was a very powerful moment, listening in this silent space, the names of people that were absent. And the act of reading while walking became an act of return, a collective mourning, and temporary home for absent and living bodies. And the landscape number 2 was relational listening. We stand back to back. We don't look at each other. We just feel each other. And we follow a route that is a little bit silent and remote from the center of the village. We just listen to the breath of the other. Your inhale becomes my rhythm, your vulnerability becomes my ground. Here the body is no longer autonomous, it exists through relation. Walking home, I realized might begin exactly here, in attunement to another body, when you walk towards another body. Inhale silence, exhale sound. Landscape number 3, landscape of abandonment. We move into ruins, broken structures, an abandoned home, a space in transition, a silent space. As we step, the space responds. Silence reveals itself not as absent, but as a threshold. Through this process of deep listening that Paulina Oliveros proposed, participants were able to discover that they are also sound makers as they are walking. I was influenced by Tim Ingalls' concept of their body, that people can have an affective resonance between the body and the world if they tune into it. And the body and the landscape begin to compose each other there. Landscape number 4 by the lake. It was not this one, it's this one. It was by the lake, and we practiced a double-fold silence, one that takes place in between, in small gestures between sea and shore, between body and soul. In this state of attunement, the boundary between inner and outer softens. The lying body merges with the collective body of the landscape, and participants are invited to listen to the water, to listen this movement and these small gestures while they put their ears very close to the water. Landscape number 5, on a road of soil. The score shifts to walking rhythms. Is it always upbeat, downbeat? Step, pause. Listen to your walking rhythm. Observe how the body is orchestrated by the landscape and how a dialogue emerges. Can we really imagine the walker as a neutral subject? I was wondering. It is obvious that we have patterns that we follow, and these patterns there we're trying to break them, creating some silences, trying to break this upbeat and downbeat. We're finishing in a small church, and we're practicing a score from Bolino Oliveros that says, "Walk so silently that the bottom of your feet become your ears." And the architecture amplifies even the smallest movement, and silence is no longer absence, but is something very dense, a space where the ear-body fully merges, walking together in collective silence as slowly as possible. And each participant improvises their own listening, and when we finish, they write a personal score of what needs to be heard. We exchange them, and we create a temporary archive of embodied knowledge. Through these stages, inaudible bodies explore walking as listening, transforming the human body into a vessel of sound. And here are some other scores. This album proposes listening as political, relational, poetic, and ecological act. We're not owners of the world in which we exist and move. We are shaped by it. We are inhabited by it. Walking became so regular, so familiar, that the way home became home. And perhaps silence is the space where this truth becomes audible. Perhaps it is the moment we become aware that every breath is shared. Inhale, the world enters. Exhale, we return, is transformed. Silence lives in between. And if we listen carefully beneath the silent skin of in-between spaces, we may enter a shared collective grief, one that transcends the visible, where public and private intersect, creating space for healing and for imagining a shared cosmos. How will it be not to hear your own breathing anymore? Was something that one of the participants wrote at the end. Thank you for listening.